everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Today our focus is on safety, especially when working with and storing grain. We begin with our stored products engineer Carol Jones to talk about this new safety trailer and how it will help communities and farmers across Oklahoma.
Oh, we are so fortunate in Oklahoma. This is a one-of-a-kind trailer that we just received about 3 months ago. This trailer is a grain engulfment, confined space, entrapment rescue simulator. That's a long name for a piece of equipment that helps us teach farm families and elevator workers how to be safe working around grain bins. It also teaches our first responders in the state how to help someone once they do become entrapped or have an accident inside a grain bin.
Talk about the partnership that took place kind of throughout the university, really drawing on the resources that are available from multiple different departments to get this going.
We are so fortunate in Oklahoma to have fire services training in partnership with Biosystems and Ag Engineering and the College of Ag Sciences and Natural Resources. We came together to partner because they have the access to the fire service training group here in Oklahoma. They do thousands of training sessions throughout the state all year long. In Biosystems and Ag Engineering, we're doing the research behind what happens to someone when they become entrapped in the bins, and our extension group also talks to farmers and farm families particularly about how to be safe working around a bin. So we'd like to put fire services and training out of business. If everybody were safe, we wouldn't need our first responders, but we all know that's not going to happen.
So the goal of this is to not only train the people who are using the equipment on the farm,
Right,
but also those first responders.
When they show up to respond to an incident that's happened, someone's entrapped in grain or they've become entangled in equipment around the farm, they need to know how to execute that rescue. 7 years ago, we lost 2 firefighters in Hydro, Oklahoma in a grain bin because they didn't have the proper training to do what they needed to do to respond that day. That should never happen in Oklahoma. We expect more than that. Our standards are higher than that. So we needed to train our first responders in what to do. So it not only rescues our ag workers, but it also keeps our firemen safe also.
This time of year, harvest has been wrapped up for a few weeks.
Fast and furious.
Folks are busy though with their grain and on the farm, so this could
Right.
be the time of year when we would see more accidents?
It is. We're moving out last year's crop to make room for this year's crop, and when grain goes out of condition, mold develops or some kind of moisture problem where we can't get the grain out of the bin with an auger or reclaim system. That's when people go in the bins to remedy the problem, and that's when things happen. So our first response is don't get your grain in bad condition, keep grain in good condition, and we can help you with hints on how to do that through our extension fact sheets. But the second idea is that when you do go into a bin, you need to have the proper equipment on, the safety equipment. You need a harness and a lifeline and a partner. Don't ever work alone in a bin without a partner just outside the bin to communicate with you and to call the rescue if we need that. So yes, and children, 30% of our incidents are in children under the age of 16, and that's what's so sad. Our children work with us on the farms, and I just can't stress enough how dangerous some of our equipment is, and we address that when we teach with the simulator.
This is our 40-foot grain engulfment and confined space rescue simulator. We've got a 2-ring grain bin that we use to simulate engulfing a victim inside of there and then rescuing them out from the top side. Moving forward on the trailer, we've got storage bins for all the rescue equipment, cofferdams, rescue augers, things of that sort. Extra room for any other equipment that's needed for a rescue. The back of the trailer houses a secondary hopper used for storage and transportation of our simulated grain, also storage for the cut panels that they use during the class to teach rescuers how to actually cut the grain bin and evac grain out the side if the auger is inoperable or the person is entrapped in the auger itself. That way we can evac the grain and make the rescue. We'll go ahead and go to the top of the trailer and we can see the top of the grain bin and the hopper from there. This is the top side of our simulated grain bin with our simulated grain inside. It is a plastic pellet. It's used to keep down the allergies that you would have with wheat or corn or milo or any of the other types of grains. It does react a lot like a wheat. It will engulf somebody in once we've kicked on an auger and we've done the class. There would be an A-frame set up here to evac the victim from the top side once we've got our rescuers in there with their coffer dams and other tools to free that victim safely and efficiently to basically save a life.
It needs to be out in Oklahoma and the surrounding states, and it's free of charge.
Thanks a lot, Carol. And for more information on scheduling the trailer in your community and for information on the fact sheets that Carol mentioned, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Good morning, everyone. Al Sutherland is off this week, so you have me here to give you some good news and some bad news. So let's start right in with the drought monitor map, and we'll see what we have. Well, for the good news, the drought has shrunk just a tad. We did get rid of some of that yellow abnormally dry color across parts of north central Oklahoma and a little bit of southwestern Oklahoma, and some improvements in southeastern Oklahoma. Now, unfortunately, that drought is still sticking around. That's the bad news across central Oklahoma, up into the northwest, and then across west central Oklahoma. So the recent rainfall did improve some parts of the state. Other parts still need a little bit more. We can see that on the 30-day accumulation map from the Oklahoma Mesonet. Very large area of 6 to even as much as 12 to 13 inches across eastern Oklahoma, and then up into north central and northeastern Oklahoma, and a little bit down into southwestern and south central Oklahoma. So that's where we had those improvements. If you'll notice, however, that west central part of the state and out into the panhandle, they got the lighter greens and blue colors. Those are areas that have had less than 2 inches of rainfall over the last 30 days. And again, that's where we see that yellow and brown color on the drought monitor map signifying abnormally dry conditions and moderate drought. So those are the areas that we need upcoming rainfall to impact. To illustrate that, on the departure from normal rainfall map, again from the Mesonet for the last 30 days, we see those deficits from 2 to 4 inches across central into west central Oklahoma, a little bit lower deficits scattered across the state, and then of course some surplus amounts across eastern Oklahoma and scattered across other parts of the state. And one of the reasons we're still in danger for drought, if we go out to the 60-day departure from normal rainfall map, we see much larger deficits. Kingfisher has a deficit of 7.2 inches, parts of central Oklahoma in the Oklahoma City metro area 5 to 6 inches, and then 4 to 5 inches up into eastern Oklahoma, north central Oklahoma. And then again, we have those good surplus amounts from south central up through east central Oklahoma and other scattered areas. So that's why we still have drought, and that's why we're still in danger for drought progressing during the rest of the summer. It seemed like a hot summer so far, but not really that bad. Let's take a look at the days with maximum air temperatures at least 100 degrees or higher. This is only through July 11th, but really benign numbers across the state, except out in the Panhandle, where Hooker leads the state with 15 days at or above 100 degrees. The only one close would be Beaver at 9, just to their east, and also Hollis down in southwestern Oklahoma at 8. So not too bad so far this summer. However, we still have a good 1 to 2 months of summer left. If normally we look at the last few years of summer, as we get into September, we should start to cool down. Until then, we'll be watching those drought conditions and making sure those do not progress across the state. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Last week we had Alex Roccatelli on talking about estimating forage for pastures. And Dave, how do we take that data and actually estimate it for cattle consumption?
Well, it's important to have a good estimate of how much the cattle will consume, because like Dr. Roccatelli mentioned, you don't want to overgraze your pastures. That's probably the worst thing you can do. On the other hand, you don't want to grow a lot of crop and underutilize it and let it go to waste. So the animal side of the equation is every bit as important as the forage amount side of the equation. And so a long-term standard that was accepted many, many years ago and still is a standard, maybe make you giggle when I mention it because, well, it's kind of a surprise, but the standard animal use equivalent is based on a 1,000 pound beef cow, which we don't have too many of in this country these days. But just if people understand that standard assumes that on average throughout the year, that 1,000 pound cow will consume about 26 pounds of forage. Okay, so if they know those two values, they can eventually get to a good estimate of what their animals will consume.
There's, like you say, not many 1,000 pound cattle out there. How do we make the adjustment in that for, say, a 1,400, 1,500 pound cow or a calf?
Good point, because a critical concept, and maybe we'll call it a nuance of that concept, is so a 1,000 pound cow consuming 26 pounds of forage is 2.6% of her body weight, right? Well, it turns out that many experiments would demonstrate that smaller calves actually consume more as a percent of their body weight. Larger animals, 1,500 pound cows, 2,000 pound bulls, consume a smaller percent of their body weight. Now, as they get bigger, they consume more forage. It's just a smaller percent of their body weight. So it's a little bit of a nuance. And I'd say the best way for folks, if they want to kind of practice on those calculations, is go to the fact sheet we've linked on the website. Those guidelines are given there. So we've talked about the standard animal use equivalent. So then we can talk about, an animal unit day then is 26 pounds. An animal unit month is 26 pounds times 30 days of forage utilization. Animal unit year is 26 pounds times 30 days times 12 months. And so that'll get you about the amount of forage that an animal will consume in a year. So we can go from there to estimating how many animals you ought to have on a certain pasture for a given length of time based on standing crop out there in that pasture.
Well, that's a lot of great information, and for a link to all of that information, you can find a fact sheet on our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
In the midst of summer in Oklahoma, we of course are lucky enough to get those high pressure heat domes that sit on us for seemingly days on end. And that in itself tends to cause some stresses to some of the plants that we might be growing for a hay crop. For instance, one of these summer annuals, a forage sorghum type plant. That heat stress can result in a couple of toxicities that we need to be aware of. Not necessarily scared of, but aware of, so that we can manage around them. The first one that we want to talk about today is nitrates. This is something that can accumulate whenever these plants get stressed enough. They continue to take up nitrate out of the soil, but their metabolism has changed, been reduced, to where it doesn't utilize that nitrate as well, and it accumulates in the plant over time. And that's how we get some of these high nitrate forages that we occasionally find either by testing or, unfortunately, by causing some toxicity to cattle. I think we want to remember that this year, before we cut the plant, before we put this down in the windrow and then into a bale, let's test it to see if it in fact is high nitrate due to the weather stresses that we are having or might have in the next few weeks. You can visit with your local county extension office about the testing procedure that will work best in your area. Some of them might use a field test, which is just the drop of diphenylamine on the stem of the plant to see if there's nitrate present. Others may suggest that you go ahead and get a grab sample of the forage and send it into the OSU Soil, Water, and Forage Testing Laboratory here at Oklahoma State University. You want to do that a few days ahead of when you plan to cut the crop so that you have a chance to get the report back to see where you're at. If it happens to be extremely high in nitrate, something in the neighborhood of 10,000 parts per million or more, then you still have the option of waiting until the weather changes, the plant goes back to more normal metabolism and lowers the nitrate concentration. Because once you cut that particular crop, the amount of nitrate that's in it will be there all the way till next winter when you decide to feed it. So this year, let's go ahead and test the crop before we cut it, and that way we'll have a better chance to manage this situation in terms of nitrate toxicity. Now, if you'd like to know more about working your way through a situation where nitrates may be an issue with the forage crop that you're growing this summer, I really urge you to go to the SUNUP website. That's sunup.okstate.edu, and under show links we'll have a link to the OSU fact sheet. It's 2903. It's nitrate toxicity of livestock. Go ahead and download that and you'll learn a lot more than what we have time to tell you today about helping to prevent the situation that could cause some real problems next winter. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, the USDA released the latest WASDE report and we saw wheat prices decline. What was in that report?
Well, most of the information in the report was neutral to, I think, positive for the market situation. You look at production, it was slightly lower than it was the month before. They did raise ending stocks, but again, it was a minor move. Increase in the U.S., slightly lower world ending stocks. If you look at the average annual price for 17-18 marketing year, they raised it 50 cents. That's good news. I think the problem is that the report projections or estimates were above what the trade was expecting. And expectations drive price. Supply and demand is important, but it's what the market thinks supply and demand is and is going to be that drives prices. Their expectations below the USDA, so they adjusted price down.
So where do funds then fit into this situation?
Well, we've been talking about the funds. We're always talking about the funds because they drive the prices in the short run. You go back, 2-3 months, the funds on the Chicago wheat contract, they were about 130,000 contracts short. They are now probably 20 or 25,000 contracts long. If you look at hard red winter wheat or the KC contract, they're probably 20,000, 20,000 long. In other words, the funds have switched from a pessimistic stance to a positive stance, positive to neutral. They may be back to neutral now, stance of the market, and I think that's good news.
What is the latest information you have on the 2017 hard red winter wheat crop?
Well, it's relatively good. Of course, USDA's estimate at 758 million bushels. That was slightly above the trade's 745 million, so what's a few million bushel among friends. But you look at last year, we produced 1,080 million bushels. The 5-year average, 880 million bushels. Of course, the Oklahoma crop right at 90 million bushels. It's an excellent milling crop, a good test weight, near 60 pounds. Protein is low, and there's a protein problem, and the millers need protein to get some strength in the flour, but the report I get from the millers is that it's a better milling quality wheat than last year. What they're having to originate is protein, and of course we've talked about that protein premium.
As we start making plans for the 2018 crop, what are some of the takeaway lessons then?
I think it's the protein. You look at the ordinary wheat or below, it's even to a negative basis. You go out to 12, you're well above $1.20 premium for that. You go 13, 14, you get over $2 premium for protein. I think the takeaway lesson is that protein premium, maybe not as high as it is now, but it's possible. It's going to be here in June of 18. I think producers need to search for ways that they can increase the protein of the Oklahoma wheat crop, and that's going to increase the demand like we saw this year. You know, we said if you produce a quality product, prices will increase. They produced a good milling product and prices increased, you know, $1.50 overall we saw. And so I figure out how to get a good quality crop next year.
And with all that in mind, marketing strategy that you recommend?
Take the emotion out of the market. The prices are going to be volatile. Take the emotion out, set target prices. When you hit that price, sell the wheat, set target dates. If the price doesn't get up to that target price by that date, pull the trigger on it. Take the emotion out of it, develop a mechanical marketing strategy, and write it down and follow it.
Terrific. Kim, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk about safety overload devices.
Okay, when you're running a rotary cutter on your tractor, you typically need to have some type of torque limiter in case you hit something. Now most of your PTO devices won't have them, but a rotary cutter for the most part will have something like that.
And really what the safety overload device or your torque limiter is your weakest link in the system. And this is the part that's supposed to slip or fail when you hit something hard.
So in the ideal world, if you have one of these on here, it'll save your PTO shaft or even your output shaft on your tractor or the input shaft on your gearbox.
There's three different kinds of safety overload devices. There's a friction clutch like we have here that is actually, you adjust the spring tension on it and it just begins to slip. There's also jump clutches that are geared that will tend to slip and chatter when they make a noise, or just a shear bolt in a lot of cases.
Now every few months you probably ought to make sure that your clutch is slipping and not bound up. So how you'll attempt to do that on this particular clutch, you'll see we have a bolt through here, spring in between, and then in between here we have a friction disc and some plates on each side. And what you'll do is you'll back these nuts off of here. What I do is I measure these before I begin and then back these off and then kick on the tractor and see if it slips. And you can tell if it slips just by putting a mark across here with a piece of chalk or whatever and see if it slipped. Actually, it would be between this point and here, and see if it slips. If it doesn't, then this may be so bound up you may actually have to pry it apart. Now the other thing that can happen is, yeah, you could put it back to the same one, well, at least that's a starting point, but you may have taken some friction material off when you've slipped the clutch because of rust, so you may have to add a little bit more tension. You can chalk this again while you're using it and see if it's slipping too much. If you've got a rotary cutter, get a manual for it, see what you've got. If it doesn't have one of these on it, you probably ought to think about installing one just to save your tractor and some downtime.
So there's some tips on safety overload, on PTO shafts, on Shop Stop. We'll see you next week.
Finally, today we want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the upcoming Women in Ag and Small Business Conference with Sarah Seams, who is helping getting it all organized again this year. Sarah, give us an idea of what people can expect.
Sure. So the conference is August 3rd and 4th, which is a Thursday and Friday, and it will be held at the Moore Norman Technology Center in Oklahoma City. The conference is 2 days, and over those 2 days we feature over 25 concurrent sessions from 4 tracks, and that is agriculture, alternative enterprises, business and finance, and beginning farmer.
So people can come and kind of pick what they're interested in and kind of mix and match, right?
Exactly. The participants can look at the agenda Thursday morning and decide which tracks they want to attend, which sessions, which speakers they want to hear, and they can pick and choose throughout the day.
And it's also a fun time to interact with peers across the state and socialize and sort of network too.
Yeah, so it's a great opportunity for these women to get together and network. One of the unique things about the Women in Agriculture Conference is that it draws women from all backgrounds of farming and ranching and small business and even education. So we really work to bring in speakers and address topics that will emphasize commonalities among the group.
Talk about some of the speakers and their topics this year. It changes year to year based on the current climate.
Yes, so we do have, like I said, we have over 25 concurrent session speakers. So we have quite a few speakers from industry professionals to extension specialists and educators around the state. We have topics, we have pest management this year, we have intensive production for small scale farms. We've got a session on native pollinators and even the importance of trade. In addition to the concurrent sessions and keynote speakers, we also have a Made in Oklahoma mini mall, which features Made in Oklahoma products. And then we'll also have exhibitors from Oklahoma businesses that will have resources and education for the attendance.
Sounds terrific. Talk about the cost and the registration deadline.
So the cost is $50 if they register by July 31st or $60 after July 31st. They can register online at our website, or they're welcome to give me a call and I can send them a registration brochure if they'd like to mail in a check.
And I've been before, Sarah. It's a really great event, so thanks for coming on and telling us about it.
Thanks, Lyndall.
And for more information on the conference, go to sunup.okstate.edu. And that will do it for us this week. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.